Captain Kevin Stables prepares to pilot Emory Worldwide Flight 17, accompanied by First Officer George Land. Their mission is to haul freight across the country aboard a 30-year-old DC-8 cargo plane. Before departure, they receive the load plan, detailing the weight and positioning of the freight containers. Using this information, they carefully calculate the aircraft's weight and balance to ensure stability. As they begin their routine takeoff, the airspeed comes alive. At 80 knots, they confirm the elevator checks. Just as the nose wheel lifts off the ground, the DC-8 unexpectedly pitches upward at a much steeper angle than it should. The pilots immediately recognize an issue as the aircraft starts to rotate. The sudden takeoff is followed by an uncommanded left bank. Stables takes control, acknowledging an extreme balance problem. Realizing they cannot continue the flight safely, they make the decision to return to the airport. The declaration of an emergency alerts air traffic controllers to severity of the situation. As they struggle to regain control, the ground proximity warning sounds, signaling imminent danger. The pilots work together, pushing the control columns forward in an attempt to stabilize the aircraft. Despite their efforts, the DC-8 begins a cycle of dangerous dives and climbs. The crew fights to manage the erratic behavior while attempting to reach the runway. Just as they bring the plane within sight of the airport, the struggle intensifies. They are now less than a mile from landing. Though they have made it almost all the way back, the situation remains critical. They know they must get on the ground quickly, but time is running out. Meanwhile, China Airlines Flight 120 is on final approach for landing. The pilots perform a textbook landing and proceed to park the aircraft. Just as they shut down the engines and begin to relax, an alarm sounds, alerting them to a fire. The number 2 engine is in flames, and the pilots realize they need to evacuate the passengers immediately. However, they must follow strict evacuation procedures before opening the cabin doors. As the situation escalates, they receive clearance to initiate evacuation. Flight attendants work swiftly, guiding passengers out of the aircraft. The fire continues to grow, and within 3 minutes, the risk of explosion increases. Despite the urgency, all 165 passengers and crew manage to escape unharmed. The successful evacuation is nothing short of miraculous. In another unfolding crisis, a rogue Learjet flies hundreds of miles off course, drawing national attention. The FAA begins tracking the aircraft, suspecting a hijacking or a critical malfunction. As the aircraft continues to fly with no response from the crew, F-16 fighter jets are scrambled to intercept it. Upon catching up, the pilots observe frost-covered windows and no movement inside. The Learjet has become a ghost plane. With fuel running low, experts attempt to predict the crash site. At 12:10 p.m., the jet finally runs out of fuel and begins its descent. F-16 pilots attempt to track its fall, but it disappears in the clouds before crashing into a hayfield in South Dakota. There are no survivors. Meanwhile, the crew of Nation Air Flight 2120 remains unaware of the smoke building in the cabin. Alarm bells signal equipment failures, but the true danger, an onboard fire, has yet to be fully realized. A mechanic, Jean-Paul Philippe, understands the severity of the situation. Fires on an aircraft can consume the fuselage in seconds, leaving little time for action. As the aircraft nears Jeddah, passengers struggle to breathe. Some attempt to open the doors, but the speed and altitude make it impossible. Bodies begin falling from the fuselage as the fire worsens. The pilots fight to maintain control, declaring an emergency and attempting to line up for landing. Just 2 miles from the runway, the aircraft becomes uncontrollable. The landing gear is deployed, but the elevators fail. Moments later, the plane crashes in a fiery explosion. All 247 passengers and 14 crew members perish, marking the deadliest DC-8 crash in history. Elsewhere, Concorde Flight 4590 prepares for departure. Flight engineer Gilles Jardinaud carefully monitors fuel consumption as Concorde burns through fuel at an astonishing rate. By the time it taxis to the runway,